Good morning, readers. It's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf, and today I'm going to be doing a short review of Index, A History of the by Dennis Duncan. So this book came out in 2022, and I was lucky enough to see a talk by Dennis Duncan at the Ilkley Literature Festival in October, I think, last year, and I attended with Ros from Dangling about the books. We found Dennis Duncan's talk to be incredibly entertaining, and so we were led to buy the book, which he has kindly signed, correcting his name to Duncan, Dennis in index format. So when I talk about this book, I keep wanting to say it's by Duncan Dennis instead of Dennis Duncan. He has also very kindly put hi beside his name in the index of the book, which is related to a joke that he explained in his talk and that's also recounted in the book. And it's kind of a joke that's relevant to modern times, of the idea that we are interested in ourselves, we like to potentially look ourselves up, and it's a joke about an American politician who the first thing he does, or the idea is that the first thing that he'll do when he gets a book that he knows he might be mentioned in, is go to the index where somebody has written hi to say, I saw that you were going to do this. So that's just one example of the many anecdotes and humorous moments that you will come across in Index, A History of the. There is a quote from this book that I just have to start with, because I can believe that you would think, this sounds like a very dry book. Why has somebody created a history of the index? And it is a quote by somebody called Leigh Hunt, and he's talking about indexes written by somebody called indexes in the of the Tatler and the Spectator, so two previous journals, and he says, let anyone read them and call an index a dry thing if he can. And that is what I would say about this book. Read it and then call indexes a dry thing, because I had no idea about the world of the index. I had no idea of the extent of work that goes into them, and the extent of history that's behind them, and the way that indexes have developed over time, and how they've been used as sort of political weapons and tools for sort of entertainment, and how indexes came to be how we know them to be today. And one thing that Duncan does quite effectively is also show how indexes have accompanied sort of the path of human knowledge, and the ways that human knowledge has been recorded differently and managed differently, leading up to the present day. And he does bring in how indexes have come to be more automated, or how computers as a tool have helped to build indexes, but also how indexes have helped to build computing tools, such as particularly search engines, which are effectively forms of indexing themselves. I was so entertained by this book. I put loads of tabs in. I'm not going to refer to all of them in this, because I just wanted to give you a little taster. But yeah, the one thing that I really wanted to definitely say about this book is that it comes with its own index, and that index was created by a professional indexer who is called Paula Clarke Bain. And I do think that, for saying this is a book about indexes, they really should have put Paula Clarke Bain's name on the front, because this is the first time that I've ever read an index from A to Z, and I loved it. It was very entertaining. And what Duncan does is he includes two indexes. So he includes an index that is built using very modern technology, in which, like, artificial intelligence reads the book and tries to automatically generate an index. And I read that one, and it's very weird, because it tries to sort of process the themes of the book, and tries to come up with what things should be tagged as an index. And for example, I was reading it and I saw this line, like, amateur marine biologist, and I was like, there's a lot of weird trivia in this book, but I don't remember reading anything about an amateur marine biologist. So I went to the page, and it turned out that the AI has picked that out of a quote that happens to be in there about Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes being a literary character who was fond of creating his own indexes as a way of organising his knowledge and improving his ways of handling his cases. As a Sherlock Holmes fan, I quite appreciated that little bringing in of Sherlock Holmes. But clearly, amateur marine biologists shouldn't be in the index of this book. It's just something that the computer thought should be in there. Paula Clarke Bain then does her own index, which is obviously meticulous, accurate, helpful, but she brings in a lot of the sense of humour and a lot of the techniques that Dennis Duncan refers to in the body of the text. So you kind of have to read the two together, and they work really symbiotically. If you've read the text, then you'll get the jokes in the index. And if you don't read the index and don't get the jokes in the index, then you haven't really finished reading the book, I would say. Just to point out one little element, I guess, of the sense of humour. There is a section in which Dennis Duncan writes about indexes used politically to kind of tear apart your political opponents, and particularly there is one called A Short Account of Dr. Bentley by way of the index, in which this poor man who actually, reading the story, I think possibly might have been perhaps neurodivergent and perhaps didn't realise how his criticisms were coming across to the people that he was trying very hard to inform of the right way of doing things, and his opponents get hold of his approach, and he's correct. They can't criticize him for his accuracy, so instead they launch this ad hominem attack in the form of an index. So you've got page references to his egregious dullness with a long list of pages following on from it, his pedantry with a long list of pages following on from it, his familiar acquaintance with books he never saw, with again a long list of references. And that is a theme that comes up in the book, the worry that people have that things like indexes that make it easier to find information will stop people from reading properly. So bearing in mind this index about Dr. Bentley, let's see what the index of Paula Clarke Bain has to say about the automated indexes. Automated indexing, various page references, obviously it's a topic that comes up a few times in the book, attempts to index like a human, page 254. So the point at which people started to use automated indexing to try and take over from human indexes. Fails, page 304 to 307, which are the pages of the automated index. Anyway, that absolutely tickled me, and there are a lot of little details in that index, so I have to really strongly recommend that. There is such a range in this book. I would say it's a history of the index, but it covers a whole lot. It covers about sort of like the development of the book, page numbering, the printing press, how techniques had to be different with scrolls versus with books. And generally just takes on anything that I think Dennis Duncan thought was slightly interesting and thought to put in. He's got a very good writing style and a very good way of bringing out the humour in a book, I suppose, or in an incident. What I would say is that as somebody who's never really thought about indexes before, apart from when they go wrong, and I have found myself that with medical textbooks, often they're not perfect. So I've never thought of an index other than thinking, why is this word not in the index that I really need? He doesn't provide any kind of like introduction to the index, I suppose. He doesn't provide any kind of explanation of, what is a head word or something like that. You can work it out from context, but I would have appreciated maybe like a very short chapter of being like, this is what the index is kind of most commonly now in the present day. This is the terms that we use to describe an index. However, that said, I really enjoyed the way that he looks at the two different forms of indexes developing from around 1230 was when the first kind of actual index seemed to happen, and like the different divergent forms. So it was a good book. I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend it as a kind of a light non-fiction read. It took me a day to read. I had a travel day, so I just kind of plunged in. And I would read anything else that Dennis Duncan happened to write. I would read happily if he did a history of the short history of the footnote, an explanation of the contents page, like anything that he chooses to go into. I think he's actually a professor of English literature at UCL at the moment. So he's got a great in-depth knowledge of his subject area there. Anyway, so that was just a short introduction to a short review of the history of the index. I'm a little bit out of practice with the whole booktube thing. I will try to respond to comments, but I don't have a reliable internet connection, or I won't do for the next several months. So if I don't, I'm not trying to be rude, but it's just, where I am at the moment. However, it's nice to at least make a video. So thank you very much for watching, and take care, and yeah, speak to you soon.